Welcome everybody. This is Megan Wyatt. Hopefully some of you were not here when I just totally messed up my first introduction going sideways. But I've switched to a new camera, so alhamdulillah, inshallah, we can start this Facebook Live. Obviously, I'm not Muhammad Sharif. I'm taking over his page today on behalf of Discover You and their program, The Marriage That Led to Jannah. So we're going to be talking here in just a minute about, well, a really important conversation, and that is fighting and how to fight better, understand fighting a little bit more, and we're going to talk about fight, flight, and I'm going to add in a third one, which is freeze, which was not in the title. So hopefully this time we are squared away and we can dive in without you having to turn your head sideways to watch me. So welcome everybody to this special Facebook Live. It's an honor and a privilege to be here, and would love to hear where you're tuning in from today. So you're welcome to give a shout out over in the comments section. Let me know where you're from. I am tuning into you live from an actually rainy, cloudy Southern California. And for those of you who don't know anything about California, we rarely get rain. We rarely have clouds. So my kids are super excited today because it looks like it's going to rain most of the day. So it's a little bit cloudy and dreary here for us, but alhamdulillah, we always need the rain. So where are you tuning in from? And we'll dive into our topic here in just a minute. Oh, mashallah. Welcome, Yamama, from windy Cleveland, Ohio. I'm originally from Ohio. So it's nice to meet another Ohioan. Long Island, New York. Sylvia, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Facebook Live. David from Italy. Welcome. Assalamu alaikum. Lovely to have you tuning in today. And again, for those of you just joining, this is Megan Wyatt. I am one of the speakers in the program, The Marriage That Led to Jannah, which, by the way, registration for that's going to be closing on December 1st. But for the little bit of time I have with you today, we're going to be talking about fighting and hopefully how to improve your relationship and how you fight. And if you're single, by the way, this information, of course, is still going to be beneficial to you for, inshallah, in the future when you are married. But actually, any relationship that you have, some of what I'm going to share with you is going to be applicable into any relationship. Because every single relationship that you have with another person, at some point in time, there's probably going to be some tension. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to de-escalate some of that tension. So again, welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for the shout outs. It's lovely to have you here. So in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, I bear witness there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, and that Muhammad is his last and final messenger. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, or as we all like to say, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So let's talk a little bit about fighting. So the topic of this Facebook Live was fight or flight. And when it comes to arguments and when it comes to disagreements and when it comes to tension, there's different things that happen within all of us, which leads us, to make choices in terms of how we're going to handle conflict. And everybody has a certain mode which they kick into automatically when they're upset. And so just kind of putting those out there, because I think it's important first to understand a little bit about yourself. So think back to the last time you got really frustrated with somebody or you were really irritated with them. What was it that you felt like doing in that moment? Or what was it that happened when you were at the height of frustration? Some people, when they're really irritated, when they're really upset, when they're really angry, whatever it is, when they're really disappointed, when they're really hurt, some people go into what we call fight mode. And fight mode, you could understand this in so many different ways, but I think simplistically, just to explain it, that's a person who just doesn't quit on the argument. That's a person who keeps pouring in energy and pouring in energy and pouring in energy into whatever that moment is, whatever kind of conflict it is. They don't quit. They don't just walk away. They keep pouring energy in, and that is their mode of conversing when they're upset. They keep pouring that energy in. Other people have what we maybe would call a flight response. And a flight response doesn't necessarily mean leave, but that is one of the explanations. So a person is in an argument, they're upset, they're irritated, and you know what, they're just done with this. So that's that person maybe that walks away, they leave the room, they leave the event, they leave the space altogether. Or sometimes there isn't the opportunity to physically leave, so they emotionally leave. They shut down completely. They check out. They're not interested in conversing anymore. They're not interested in what you have to say. They're just interested in basically preserving themselves, and so they completely shut down. And other people, there's freeze. They just freeze up. And so this is an individual that maybe they just don't know what to say, and so words don't come out right. They feel overwhelmed. They don't know how to respond. And so sometimes when they do try to respond, everything comes out wrong. And so as a result of that, the argument gets worse because they're not able to think clearly about what they want to say. They're not able to feel connected to themselves, or just feel kind of frozen in the situation. And so sometimes they don't say anything at all, which can also, interestingly enough, add fuel to the fire in an argument because the other person's looking for a response. So take a second to think, that last time you're really irritated, you're really frustrated. Are you the fighter? Are you the person that's, the flight person? You're kind of flighty. Or are you the one that's frozen, right? So the fight, the flight, and the freeze. All three of these responses, there's no way to say that like one is better over the other when we're just talking about sort of that visceral reaction to an argument. They're just different human states. Some people keep pouring that energy in, like I said, they're that fighter. Some people, they shut down emotionally or they physically leave. Other people freeze up and they either speak and things don't come out right, or they just stay silent. But it's not the kind of silence that we would say is beneficial silence. It's not a silence that is warm. It's not a silence that is showing patience. It's a cold silence. It's an overwhelmed silence. It's an anxious silence. So which one are you? Which one are you? Think back to that. And I actually did an interesting quick survey on my Wives of Jannah page, because that's primarily where, for the past 10 years, I've been working with wives and couples in their relationships. And I asked everybody, just the first two, are you more likely to be that fight person, the person that, just keeps putting their energy in, they keep talking, they don't quit when there's tension? Or are you that person that, is the flight person? You walk away, you just shut down and walk away. And the last time I checked on my page for how that survey was going, I put it up last night around like midnight, my time, most of the people were shut down and walk away. And I think it was like double the amount of people had said that they were shut down and walk away people. They were flight people, whereas other individuals were the fighters. They want to just keep going and keep talking until they figure things out. So what do we do with this information? How can it help you to understand this? It's so important first, when you're talking about the anatomy of a disagreement between two people, to understand right now what is your normal response and your normal reaction when you're frustrated and when you're upset. Because when you can first recognize what your reaction is, what your go-to mode is, you can pause and ask a question. Is the way you're responding in your fights, in your disagreements with your spouse, the people that you love, is it serving you? Is it serving the relationship? Is it serving the conversation? Or is the way you're responding in that particular moment hurting you both more, or hurting, the progress of the conversation? Sometimes it's better to stay engaged in a discussion. Sometimes it's better to walk away from a discussion. Sometimes it's better to just freeze altogether and just sort of pause both of you talking. Depending on the personalities, depending on the type of individuals, depending on what you're talking about, there can be, different modes that are going to serve you both better than maybe the one that you're used to. And sometimes you need all of the above, right? So sometimes it's better to not disengage from an argument, because if you do, it's going to drag on longer and longer and longer. And other times it's better to completely take a break, because if you don't, you're going to keep fighting longer and longer and longer, right? And sometimes it's good just to call, just like, let's just pause for a minute and let's recollect ourselves, sort of call that freeze. But most importantly in all of this, when we're talking about fighting, is the one thing I want to share with all of you is that having disagreements in a relationship, that's completely normal. And the reason why it's so important that I share this with you is because, having worked with so many couples and many different wives as well, I hear over and over again people thinking, I must have married the wrong person, because we're not getting along. I must have married the wrong person because we're having fights. I must have married the wrong person because we just can't seem to agree and we keep having these arguments. But every relationship has its ups and downs. Everybody goes through difficult times. Everybody goes through moments where they're having a disagreement about something. Sometimes it's over really small things. It's one of those days where, you were just tired and he was just hungry. And as a result, the two of you, it's like a cat and a dog in a space, right? You just get upset with each other, but it's easy to move on. Other times maybe you're disagreeing over bigger things that represent one of your values that you feel really strongly about. And they're talking about one of their values that they feel really strongly about. And unfortunately, at the moment, your values don't seem to match up. Those disagreements require a lot more work and effort in order to disengage from them being a fight and turning them into a conversation. But it is important, I think, as a first step, just to understand that everybody is going to have some kind of conflict in their relationship. And I have this sort of secret love of mine, and that is whenever I'm out in public, I love to see elderly people that are together. They're in their late 70s or the early 80s, and you see them together and they're holding hands, or maybe the wife is leaning on her husband's arm and she's got her cane, or maybe someone's pushing the other in a wheelchair. I just really love to see older couples together, and they're laughing and they're talking and they're just having such a great time. About a month ago, my family and I went out to an Italian restaurant for dinner, and right next to us was this elderly couple. And it seems like they were friends with everybody in the restaurant because they were talking and calling over so many of the waiters and the waitresses and catching up with them about their kids and what their kids were doing in school. It was just so sweet. But mostly I just enjoyed that they were sharing a meal together, that they were having a good time together. And so one of the things I like to do is ask couples that have been together for a long time, what do you think is the secret to a successful relationship? And first of all, there's a number of different answers that come from this. Sometimes you hear things like, don't go to bed angry. A lot of you have probably heard that kind of advice. Other people will say things like, have a little deafness in one ear. I hear that a lot from wives. And basically what that means is sort of be able to tune out some of the things that their husbands would say or do and just kind of ignore it so that it doesn't become an issue. Some people have said just have a great sense of humor. Even recently, I was on an airplane and I sat down next to this woman, and I swear it's for the 3.5-hour plane flight, she adopted me as her granddaughter. She was the sweetest woman ever. I got lots of pats on my leg and on my shoulder. She was so cute. But at some point, she was talking about her marriage, and she was in her mid-70s. And she told me, yeah, my husband and I, we never really fought. And I was like, that's really interesting. Can you tell me more about that? Because I'm actually a relationship coach, and I tell people all the time that, fighting is normal to some degree. And she goes, well, sure. She goes, but my husband had this way. And she said, he would come to me, and she made this really serious face, and she went like this. And she got 2 inches from my face telling me this story. And she said, he would point to his face, and he had this really serious look. And she'd say, we need to talk. And she said, and I would know it was time to talk. And we would go and we'd carve out time and we would sit down, she said, and we would talk. And I would listen to what was on his mind, and he would listen to what was on my mind, and we'd work towards a solution. And she said, I never understood what was there for people to fight about in a relationship. I mean, it was truly heartwarming to hear that they just had this way of communicating so they could work through their challenges. But I would say that most of the people that I've talked to that are in their 70s and 80s that have been married a long time, they will all tell you these tips and tricks for having a long-lasting marriage. But what those tips and tricks reveal is the fact that they gained this wisdom by going through difficult times. So in other words, they were married 45 years, but in there were pockets where they learned what worked. They learned what they could do to fight better. They learned how to understand each other better. They learned how to stop having the same fight over and over again because they figured out what to compromise or what to sacrifice and how to honor each other. And so even in their advice is sort of that encouraging hope and understanding that with the longevity of marriage, things can and will get better if you have two people that are committed to learning about each other, two people that are committed to understanding each other, and two people who want things to improve. So there were hard times that they went through, but there were good times, and those good times were the ones that took over the relationship and allowed it to last, alhamdulillah, mashallah. So think about that the next time you look for those bits of wisdom. great knowledge always comes from some kind of experience, and most of those experiences are going to be difficult ones. So coming back, again, welcome to everybody if you're just tuning in. This is Megan Wyatt. I'm taking over the page today for Discover You's program, The Marriage That Led to Jannah. And we're just having a conversation about sort of fighting, the anatomy of fights, and what happens when we react in a fight. Some of us are fighters, some of us are flighty people, some of us freeze. And I said in the beginning that fighting people just keep pouring energy into an argument because they want to solve it. Flight people shut down emotionally or they physically leave. And then the people that are sort of those freeze individuals often just kind of pause, they're overwhelmed, and either what comes out of their mouth isn't really the best thing, or they don't really say anything at all, which can also be frustrating. So in the beginning, for those of you who weren't here, I was just kind of asking you to consider which one are you normally. Now coming back to a fight, looking at how can you de-escalate fights, how can you prevent arguments. One of the things that I will talk about in the Marriage That Led to Jannah program is some of the really important steps that I believe are necessary for people to fight better or fight less, so they can experience, loving feelings more often, so they can experience greater calm in their relationship. In the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about marriage, there are 3 words that are used to describe it. One of them is mawadda, which we translate as love. One of them is rahma, which we often translate as mercy. And one of them is sakina, which we translate often as tranquility. And so one of my goals when I'm helping others is to help them get to that sakina, that tranquility more often, to be able to experience that love and that mercy more often. Because even though marriage is challenging at times, and even though it's difficult at times, you should never feel like you're suffering in your relationship. That's something that should not be happening. So if you feel like you're suffering, if you feel like you're suffocating in your relationship, that's where you definitely have some clear signs. It's probably time to reach out for some outside help to get some intervention so that you guys can get back to a better and healthier place. So looking at fight, flight, or freeze, what are the things that can help you choose a better response? Well, one of them, which I don't have the time to go to in great detail, but I will in the course, is vulnerability. The more you can be vulnerable with yourself first and understand what's really going on inside of you, when you can get really in touch with the thoughts that are going through your mind, the feelings that you have in your body, and basically the energy that you're carrying, the more you can recognize that in yourself, the greater you can be vulnerable with your spouse and let them know the thoughts that are in your mind, the energy that's in your body, the feelings that you're having. What happens when people are fighting and fights just keep taking over their relationship is that they don't understand at some point what they're even fighting about, because they're so charged with energy, they're so charged, whether it's with anger, whether it's with fear, whether it's with hurt, that they're no longer connected to their bodies. They're not feeling physically present in their bodies. And as a result of that, they're also not connected to their hearts, and they're not thinking, right? They're not connected to what's going on in their minds. And so things are just going quickly, and arguments are happening, and people are just at it. And you said this, and you said this, but yeah, well, you're like this. Yeah, well, you do this. And you guys know that mudslinging is happening, right? And things are just going back and forth and back and forth. And sometimes on top of that, you have where someone starts bringing out every single thing you've ever done wrong in the past. And so the other person starts bringing out every single thing they've ever done wrong in the past. And now you've got this huge mountain that you're both trying to figure out how to deal with. And it started with something small. One of the ways to slow that entire process down is to really look inside yourself and check in. What are you really feeling beneath all of these visceral emotions, all of this energy, all of this charge? What are you actually feeling? And what's really amazing about fighting and about arguing, and it's something I've just been able to witness over and over again working with people, beneath most fights that couples are having is hurt and disappointment and being misunderstood. It's someone whose feelings are hurt, someone who is feeling disappointed by their spouse, not understood by their spouse. And instead of being able to just say, I feel really hurt right now, other things come out. Because we tend to be afraid as human beings to be that vulnerable in our relationships. And so the problem with that is that instead of saying, you know what happened earlier today really hurt my feelings, we say, you know what, you weren't a good person today, or you weren't kind today, or what you did was wrong today. We start attacking this person that we say that we love so much. We start putting down and criticizing this person that we say we love so much, but nothing that's coming out of our mouths is loving. And so, of course, that person's going to hear all of these words, and unless they can stay vulnerable and grounded themselves, they're going to react. And so one of the things that I try to invite couples to do, and just start with yourself, because if you're the one here listening, then this means this message is for you. If you watch this later, that means this message is for you. I don't want you to think right now about your spouse or what you think they should do. I want you to think about yourself. When you are upset, are you honest? Are you vulnerable about what's really going on? Do you even know what's really going on beneath the surface within your own self? If your answer is yes, you know what's going on, my next question is, but do you share that? And most of the time, I have found that people do not. They're too afraid to trust their spouse. They're too afraid to tell them how they really feel. And what's the result of that? The result of that is more hurt and more disappointment and more being misunderstood and more fights and more problems. But if someone could just pause and say, listen, I am feeling really anxious right now because of X, Y, and Z. Or I'm feeling, disappointed right now because ABC happened. You're inviting your spouse into a conversation with you. And again, if you're not married, you can apply this in any relationship, by the way. Obviously, the degrees of vulnerability are going to vary, but being able to recognize what's going on inside yourself allows you to invite a better conversation with the person you're talking to. But in our case, we're talking about marriage, so that would be with your spouse. When you're able to really step in and recognize what's going on, you're able to better control that fight, flight, or freeze. You're able to not just have that, instantaneous gut level response, that automated knee-jerk reaction, and instead, that's where you're able to have that patience, have that discipline, because you might be feeling all these things, but you channel all of it inward, you take all of it down to your feet, you ground yourself as a person, and you open up with vulnerability and you express what's really going on. And this is a game changer for so many couples. This is huge for so many people that I wish I could teach it to everybody, how to really own what's going on inside of yourself, so that, again, you can control how you communicate. Because if right now, for example, you're having ongoing conflicts and fights and arguments, my question is going to be, is the way you're responding working for you? And of course, most people are going to say, no, it's not working. Like, I'd really like things to be better. One of the number one things that couples often ask for is communication tips. How can we communicate better? Well, this is one of the most important things that I believe will help couples communicate better, and that is to be able to get beyond fight, flight, or freeze, and be able to get beyond just those knee-jerk reactions and to really dial it back into themselves with vulnerability and understand what's really going on. So I teach this concept called fearless vulnerability. I talk about it in detail actually in my segment in the Marriage That Led to Jannah course. I walk you through what that looks like. I walk you through different examples of it so that you can understand what does it really mean to be vulnerable. Because you know what? A lot of you guys, you might think that you're vulnerable and then discover that you actually know nothing at all about what it means to be vulnerable with your spouse in your relationship. I myself used to think I was a vulnerable person until I started my own personal development journey, this entire path that led me to do what I'm doing today. And I realized I was the opposite of vulnerable. So we even have a lot of misunderstandings about what vulnerability in an intimate relationship actually looks like. So I'd like to invite all of you to consider, this portion of the course. They described the Marriage That Led to Jannah course sort of like a cake. And so there's different layers of the cake, right? So one of my layers will be how to fight less and love more, how to understand vulnerability, how to understand how to break recurring fights, how to improve your response so it's not just that knee-jerk fight, flight, or freeze response, how to be more productive in your arguments, and also how to heal from them, how to make sure that the fights that you do have aren't coming back year after year after year. How to make sure that that wound that you have with your spouse that happened like 9 years ago on your honeymoon is finally healed, and so it stops coming up, moving forward in the future. It's really about not just understanding what's going on, but how to prevent a bigger fight, but if you've had one, really how to heal and move forward so that your marriage truly gets stronger. And on top of that, alhamdulillah, there's a lot of other layers to this course's cake. And so I invite you, if you haven't done so, make sure to go to marriagetojannah.com, check out the course. We'll put the link after the Facebook Live. Please do check out the course. Find out which layer is meant for you, or maybe all of them are meant for you. The goal here is to strengthen your relationship. Myself and anybody else that works in this area, we really are passionate about seeking knowledge and believing that seeking knowledge and consistently being reminded, like any other place in our relationship, right, is something that will serve you in your marriage. So common sense isn't always common practice. So sometimes the best marital advice truly is, something that you've heard before, but you're not implementing. But also taking your knowledge deeper, making your marriage that much stronger, that much more connected, and being able to rekindle that love that you have for each other for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So registration for the Marriage That Led to Jannah course closes on December 1st. So you only have a few more days to get in the door for this course. So I highly encourage, if you are married, please check this out ASAP. If you are single, alhamdulillah, mashallah, I've had a lot of emails recently from men actually that are engaged to be married in the next 6 months or 8 months, and they're seeking knowledge and they're trying to learn more about marriage. So for all the singles out there, both men and women, this course can also give you some foundational, really important tools that you can implement in your future marriage. But again, all relationships have some common themes. You'll be able to improve other relationships in your life, inshallah, with this information. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in as we talked about fight, flight, or freeze, as we talked about how to overcome those knee-jerk reactions in a relationship, to understand, again, how it is you show up, and then what you can do in order to have a better response, which is going to be learning about vulnerability, learning more about yourself, and learning how to communicate differently, again, which will go into detail in the course. So if you have any follow-up questions about the course, please do. You can message below, and someone from Discover You staff will get back to you. You can, if you're on our email list, you can send a message there, and inshallah, someone will respond to you. Otherwise, I look forward to conversing with all of you after you've taken the course, and thank you again for letting me be here on Sheikh Mohammed Sharif's Facebook page. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.